Okay, today we're going to be looking at expressing a quantity as a proportion, or another way we can say is we're going to be expressing a quantity as a percentage of another amount. This is a quick recap from what we did in our last lesson, and that was finding the percentage of a number. Now, in this question here, it says find 20% of 60. If you recall, we had these rules that we were looking at. The first thing we had to do was express the percentage as a fraction, and we did that by putting it over 100. We changed the of to a times, and we changed the number at the end into a fraction by putting it over 1. So this is an example that we actually did in our last video. So I've got the solution down. This is something that we did previously, and we simplified the fraction as we normally do when we multiply fractions, and then we went through and did the multiplication. So that was what we did in our last lesson. One of the things I did do right at the end of last lesson's video was put this little clip. This little video clip shows you how to use a scientific calculator to simplify fractions. Now I realise that not every student has the same calculator. The buttons might be slightly different, but they might be similar to this, and they should be quite similar to this, because I think most people have a Casio. I thought I'd play this video clip again. It'll show you how to simplify fractions using a scientific calculator.
We can use the calculator for simplifying fractions. So let's have a look. Let's put in 24, hit the fraction button, 36. So to simplify that, we would just press equals and it gives us in its simplest term, 2/3. Nice and easy. So let's try another one, an easy one. So let's have 6, arrow down, and then 12. So hopefully you know what that is. And that gives us 1/2. And clear that. So let's try a more tricky one. Let's do 15 35ths, arrow down, 35, and give it equals, and it converts it to 3/7.
So as you can see, it's quite an easy function to do with your calculator. This next little video is a little bit different now. It's going to show us how to change an improper fraction to a mixed number. And I thought this is another useful hint. We're going to possibly need to use it today as well for some of your tasks. So once again, just have a bit of a watch and see if you can identify the buttons on your calculator to do the same process.
Now, say we're going to put in an improper fraction, change it to a mix. So let's have 48/7. Right, so we press equals here to get it in the right hand side of the screen, and then we press shift and SD, which takes us to 6 and 6/7, which is a mixed fraction.
Okay, so as I said last time, if you're struggling to find the keys on your scientific calculator, maybe send an email to your teacher and we can maybe work out a way of how we can help you. So today's topic, as we said, expressing a quantity as a proportion. So to express one quantity as a fraction of another, this is what we would be doing. Our fraction will be made up of our amount over our total. And as I've said in previous videos, I want you just to write this part down, and then when we do some examples, it'll make sense as to what all this means. So we're going to create a fraction using the amount over the total, and that amount will depend on what it is that we're trying to find. To express one quantity as a percentage of another, well, there's two ways. If you recall in our first lesson on percentages, we looked at two ways of converting a fraction to a percentage. In this first, on the first one here, which we can see, what we actually did was multiply the fraction by 100. Okay, so that's the fraction that we've just created up above, and then we can multiply it by 100, and we always make the whole number into a fraction by putting it over 1. Or this was the other way that we actually were able to convert a fraction to a percentage, and that was by creating an equivalent fraction over 100. Okay, so if you recall, we said that we can convert to percentage through equivalent fractions, and this is a little bit easier. I'll be using both the methods today just to try and show you how we can use either of them. So here's our first example, and it says, what percentage is 10 of 250? So the first thing we need to do is probably identify which part of this is the amount and which part of this is the total so that we can create our fraction. Now it says what percentage of 10. So in this case we can say that our amount is going to be 10 and the total is going to be the 250. So once I've got this identified, and some of these questions and the wording is going to be slightly different when you do your task. So now after we've worked that out, we can actually create our fraction. So what's our fraction going to be? So it's the amount over the total. Well, in this case, we've identified our amount is 10, and we know that our total is 250. And as always, when we're working with fractions, we always try and simplify our fractions, or we should simplify our fractions. And if I have a look at these two, now we can use our calculator, or we can say what's the highest common factor between the 10 and the 250. Now if I divide by 10, whatever I do to my numerator, I must do to my denominator. We're going to simplify the fraction, and our fraction will become 10 divided by 10 is 1, 250 divided by 10 is 25. So that's now our fraction in its most simplest form. But I haven't finished because it wants me to work out the percentage. So now I need to convert this fraction into the percentage. And the way that we do that, in this case here, I can see that my denominator is 25. And because I know that 25, that 100 is a multiple of 25, it's quite easy for me to create an equivalent fraction. So in this case, I'm actually going to be using this method here to actually convert my fraction into a percentage. So the way that we would do that is I write my fraction. I've got 1 over 25, and we're going to create an equivalent fraction. We already know what the denominator is going to be. The denominator is going to be 100, so I can put that down there straight away. Now when we're creating equivalent fractions, I need to work out what do I multiply 25 by in order to get 100. And if we multiply 25 by 4, and if I multiply my denominator by a number, I must do the same with my numerator. So I'm going to multiply that by 4. So I end up with 4 on 100. Now, I wanted a percentage, and if you remember, percentage means parts out of 100. Okay, in this case, I've got 4 over 100. So that would be my final answer of 4%. Now when you're working in MathSpace, just be a little bit careful because I believe it would like you to actually put the percentage symbol in. So you should be putting in there 4% for this particular, if you had a question similar to this. Can you please pause and copy this into your workbook? Our next question, write 22 out of 88 as a percentage. Again, the wording's slightly different, but we're understanding that we need to create a percentage. Again, I need to identify what is my amount and what is my total. So in this particular question here, we can say that our amount is 22 and the total is 88. Once we've identified those, we can then create our fraction. Okay, so our fraction, again, we're just using what we have over here. Okay, so we have our amount of 22 over our total, which is 88. Now we can use our calculator to simplify this. I'm going to use the old-fashioned way, and I know that a common factor for these two numbers happens to be 22. So if I divide 22 by 22, I get 1. If I divide 88 by 22, I get 4. So 22 over 88 in its most simplest form is 1 over 4 or a quarter. Now I'm not finished because I need to work it out as a percentage. Currently I've got it worked out as a fraction. Now again, I've got two options down below. Now again, in this case, I think if I use this option here, it's going to be a little bit easier for us. And the reason why I'm using this is because I know that 100 is a multiple of 4. So I'm going to convert a quarter into an equivalent fraction. I already know what my denominator is going to be. It needs to be 100. So what do I multiply 4 by to make it 100? I need to multiply that by 25. If I do it to my denominator, I must multiply my numerator by the same amount, so I multiply that by 25. So I end up with 25 over 100. So there's my fraction, 25 over 100. The reason why we've done this is because 25 parts out of 100 is the same as a percentage. So my final answer is going to be 25%. So 22 out of 88 as a percentage is 25%. Can you please pause and copy this example into your workbook? Okay, moving on. So what percentage of the triangles are shaded blue? Express your answer as a percentage to one decimal place. So be careful when you're completing these exercises and read what it wants you to put the answer in. In this case, it's saying that it wants the percentage to one decimal place. So just be mindful of that when you're going through and doing this calculation. So the first thing we're going to do, as we've done on the previous ones, is we need to work out what our amount is and what our total is. Now, because it wants us to find the percentage of the triangle shaded blue, how many blue shaded triangles do I have? It'll be 6, and that's going to be my amount. So in this case here, we can write that our amount is going to be 6. How many triangles do I have in total? And we can see that if I count all these triangles up, I've got 16. So now that I've worked out my amount and my total, I can work out my fraction. So my fraction will be my amount, which is 6, over my total, which is 16. Again, we can simplify using our calculator, but I'm just going to do it manually. So I've got highest common factor would be 2. Okay, they're both even, and it's the highest number, the highest common factor for both of them. So my fraction's now going to be 6 divided by 2 is 3. 16 divided by 2 is 8. So 3/8 is now the fraction, but I need to work this out now. I need to convert this fraction into a percentage. Now in this case, the way that I'm going to do it is because I can't really, 8 is not really, I can't get 100 comfortably. So what I might try and do is actually use this method here. Okay. So we're now going to work out what our percentage is. So our percentage is going to equal, well, my fraction, which is 3/8, and I'm going to multiply that by 100. We're going to 100 over 1. Now, normally when we're multiplying fractions, can I simplify in this case? Yes, we can simplify, but we can't simplify vertically. We're going to simplify on a diagonal. I've got 8 and I've got 100. So if I divide highest common factor, we'll divide by 4. We can divide by 4. And now my fraction becomes 3. 8 divided by 4 will give me 2. In fact, we might actually do this as one step. We're going to multiply this by 100 divided by 4 is 25. And I'm going to leave the 1. So I've simplified the 8 and I've simplified the 100, okay, by dividing each of them by 4. Now, what is my fraction going to become? Well, 3 times 25 is 75, and you can use your calculators, over 2. So it looks like it's an improper fraction. Now, it says in the question to express your answer as a percentage to one decimal place. So I now need to actually convert this fraction into a decimal. And we know in our previous lessons, 75 over 2 actually means 75 divided by 2. Okay, and I'm just going to move it this way because I've run out of space. 75 divided by 2 will actually be 37.5. And that's my final answer as a percentage. Okay, so the percentage of triangles that are shaded blue, 37.5%. Okay. Can you please pause and copy this example into your workbooks? Okay, moving on. So what percentage of 150 is 31? So slightly different wording here again. Okay, express the percentage as a mixed number. So again, the answer needs to be slightly different. So what percentage of 150 is 31? Again, key thing again, I would suggest that we actually write down again what is the amount and what is the total. So we've got the amount. Now in this case, the amount is 31 because it says what percentage of 150 is 31. So 31 is the amount. And the total is actually 150. So we're going to create our fraction. So we have our fraction, amount over total. So I've got 31 over 150. Now what we've been doing in our previous examples is that we have actually been simplifying it, but 31 over 150 is in its most simplified form. So there's no common factor between 31 and 150. So again, I now need to convert this fraction into a percentage. And as we know, we've got two options, but in this case here, I'm going to use this option again. So we can actually write here that my percentage is going to equal my fraction, which is 31 over 150, multiplied by 100 over 1. Now, as we normally do with multiplication, can I simplify, can I cancel out? We can't cancel out vertically, but we can diagonally. So if I divide 150 by 50, and I divide the 100 by 50, that's our highest common factor along the diagonal here, I end up with 31 multiplied by, now 100 divided by 50 is going to be 2. 150 divided by 50 is going to be 3. And the 1 remains the same. When we simplify, it just makes it a little bit easier to perform the calculation. So now we've got 31 times 2 is 61. And I've got 3 times 1 is 3. Sorry, 31 times 2 is actually 62. So we'll fix that up. And 3 times 1 is 3. So my fraction here now is 62 over 3. Now the question states that it wants me to express it as a mixed number. So I've got to convert 62 over 3 as a mixed number. Now we can do it using our calculator, as I showed you in that second video very early on, or we can have a look at this and do it the old way. So how many 3's do I have in 60? In 62? Well, in 60 we're going to have 20. I might actually put my answer here. I'm going to have 20. And I'm going to have a remainder of 2 over 3. So we divide our numerator, 62, by our denominator, and any remainders are left over the original denominator. And this answer is a percent. So what percentage of 150 is 31? Well, it's 20 2/3 of a percent. Can you please pause and copy this into your workbook? Okay, moving on. So this is our last example for today, and it says, Grace's pet dog Penny had a litter of puppies. 4 were male and 6 were female. What percentage of the puppies were female? So this is a little bit different. This is more of a practical question for us. Now, again, I would identify what is the amount. And what is the total? Now the amount is, we want to find out the percentage of female puppies. And there were 6 female puppies. So we've worked that out as our amount. The total, now it hasn't been given to us in this question. We actually need to work it out. So we've been told that there are 4 male and 6 female. So that would mean that we actually have 4 plus 6. So my total is actually 10. So now we can create our fraction. So the amount in this case is the female puppies. There was 6. The total is the total number of puppies, and there were 10. Again, we would simplify our fraction. Our highest common factor between 6 and 10, divide by 2, and divide by 2. So I end up having 3 over 5. Sometimes it's easier just to do it manually. By the time you put it into your calculator, it'll probably take you a little bit longer. So once we've worked out our fraction, we now need to convert this fraction into a percentage. And again, I've got 2 options. Now, because 100 is a multiple of 5, I'm actually going to be using this option because I do think this is a quicker way to do it. And when I can, this is my preference. So now we're going to create an equivalent fraction. I've got 3/5. We want to create an equivalent fraction. We already know what the denominator needs to be, because if it's a percentage, it needs to be parts per 100. What do I multiply 5 by? To make 100, I need to multiply it by 20. If I've multiplied my denominator by 20, I must do the same thing with my numerator to get an equivalent fraction. So 3 times 20 is 60. So I've got 60 parts out of 100. We know that that's the same as a percent, because that's what a percent means. So my final answer is 60%. So it's up to you if you want to pause and copy this one as well. Slightly different. We had to actually work out or calculate what our total was. And this is actually the end of our video for today. You'll have a look at your lesson log to see what maths-based task has been assigned for you to practice this today. Thank you.